Okay, so originally I wasn't even gonna go live tonight because I was gonna do my regularly scheduled Tuesday live tomorrow, but which I'll still do. But this is really important because I just received a call from my dear Jennifer, and she told me that uh, basically what occurred is that uh, spiders, the electronic kind, went into her computer and they took the actual video out of her computer. So if you're going to try and I guess look at that. And she was given a warning, and this is lunacy. I've never even heard of this type of thing before, but this is insane. She was given a warning that she violated something about health advice, and then also that there was an issue with violating Wikipedia. So now, evidently, violating Wikipedia is a cardinal sin. So, everybody, don't violate Wikipedia. So it's a cardinal sin now to violate Wikipedia, just for y'all's information. I'm being sarcastic, but that's ludicrous. She got a warning, so she just has to be really, really careful from here on out about what she uploads. Please go and subscribe to Jennifer. My dearest, my love, my sweet baby. I love her so much. Please go subscribe to her, and also. I'm doing this at her behest on her behalf because she just has to be really careful and just I just want everybody to go over and subscribe to her, and also if you want to go and check out Yeshua Jesus is the Truth channel. They had tagged Jennifer and I think that they still have what people are wanting to look at insofar as what I'm discussing is concerned. I could be wrong, but if you want to go and check that out, please go over and check out their channel. You can find them. They have commented in my posting I made today about this charade, this joke of a situation involving a political parasite puppet. And their theatrics as far as the things going on, in a perfect world, somebody like that who endorsed a genocidal beast mark would have been arrested and they'd have been, put away for life, for endorsing something so evil. And they even have the audacity to boast about it when they go to their little, gatherings and rallies and that's some audacity right there. You had to know that entire thing is a genocidal eugenics buying and selling beast mark, because yes, it does involve also buying and selling. Look, folks, there's nothing in the Bible that stipulated that the mark of the beast wouldn't also be able to kill people. Of course, it can be programmed to do whatever they want it to do. They can use it to, cull a bunch of people like they would cull mindless cattle, and anyone that participated in that basically is pretty mindless because, why would you just blindly give your trust away to an entity that is renowned? They're known for lying. They're known for lying. They lie about everything. They're liars. They're liars. They cannot be trusted. You cannot trust an entity like that is ran by these eugenicists, these evil satanic Western elites that I often talk about. The Eastern elites are just as evil, if not more evil, but in their own right, and they haven't invaded us yet, and we haven't had our collapse yet. So people are still buying into this false, fake, phony, bogus left-right paradigm lie. I think more and more people are becoming aware that the whole thing is a WWF, WWE type of thing where they go out, they talk a bunch of shit to each other, and then they, behind the scenes, they're all best buds. There's no such thing as a Democrat or as a Republican. There's no such thing. Those are totally artificial, fake constructs of the mind. Politics is fake, okay? Especially American politics. It's all so phony and fake. And more people have broken out of that cult mentality, the cult mentality around, these political parasites that they rally behind. They've broken out of that cult mentality. And, as I've told you all when I've made those documentary series, especially the internal issue one, I'll just call it, the internal strife, that was when there occurred a paradigm shift. And a paradigm shift would be the old paradigms pass away, they fall to the wayside because everybody realizes at some point, listen, folks, all lies always get found out. So it's like, look, at a certain point, people are just going to have to put away the old paradigms, the old beliefs, because they're going to see that it was all lies. There will be no way to avoid it. When this country collapses, when it implodes upon itself, economically, financially, with the food, the fuel, with everything, with all its debt-laden, institutions, and just everything about it is going to collapse and cave in and pancake on itself. And when that day occurs, you're going to have a paradigm shift so fast that it's going to make people's heads spin. It'll happen on a dime. It'll seem that way. It'll definitely seem that way because it'll seem that way because it's going to all happen really, really quickly. There is going to be a massive paradigm shift when the collapse occurs. And it's happened around the world. There's literally nothing that excludes us from the same type of fate, There's silver linings in any bad thing that occurs. There's always a silver lining you can find. Now, I say that because in my post, Mr. Perrin, I believe his name is, Mr. Perrin, I'm going to give you a shout out. You had said, it might be a good thing for the paradigm shift to occur. Well, it's both, there's positives about it, of course, meaning that you're not going to be under the yoke of this lie, of this humongous lie anymore. But there's going to be plenty of other bad things you'd have to worry about, like all the different evil factions with evil leaders, with evil agendas of their own. Just like in Syria, when that same type of thing occurred, some of those factions were even worse than the Assad regime was. They were even worse. They were more brutal. They were more evil. And that's a prime example. It's a prime example of how such a thing could occur here. It's a prime example. So I'm saying that to say this, is that, we're not special because we're over here or we're this big of a nation. If anything, that would make it even easier to occur here because, as I've always told people, that when you have a lack of resources and you have power vacuums, you have a weak central regime that has castrated itself. They literally have castrated themselves. How are they going to hold together a nation as vast as this if Bashar al-Assad, with his forces he began his internal conflict with, wasn't able to hold down tiny little Syria? And he should have been able to do it. In theory, he should have been able to do it with what he had available. It should have been enough. what he began his internal conflict with. But it wasn't enough, evidently, because he couldn't even hold down tiny Syria. You had in Syria, you had battles raging that were like three-way, four-way battles, you know? You had all kinds of things occurring. It was utter madness. It was utter madness in Syria. You had so many different types of things occurring. So imagine now, like in my docu-series, that you say that was exactly how it was. Let's say it was exactly like that. Let's say those factions in that hypothetical were all real factions, like real, like everybody, like even the people, even the characters, the leaders, even they're real too. Let's pretend that they're real, like literally verbatim. Everything I put in there is the reality. Now, imagine for a second you had something like, the Macon, Georgia, where it was like a three-way battle, Can you even fathom how that would even look? How chaotic that would be? How it would, literally like rip entire communities to pieces, and it would utterly devastate the civilian populations caught between such a situation. You know, that is a very, very real type of thing. That is exactly how those types of situations would look and develop. You would have multi-way encounters, I'll just call it. You would have multi-way encounters that would, because you're going to have all of these different leaders of these different groups all jockeying for power. Like I've done in the past, I'm going to run some numbers again for everybody. Here's the numbers. You've got basically, what equates to roughly 30 million hunters, people that use rifles and shotguns. They go in the woods, they hunt game with rifles and shotguns. Shotguns aren't the best types of firearms to use in a conflict, obviously, but still there's 30 million hunters in the United States. Okay, they could easily switch from four-legged to two-legged game, if you understand what I'm saying. Then you have your roughly 7 million combat veterans that have rotated through the recent wars that we've had. You got roughly 7 million that have rotated through our military in the recent wars that we've had. Not of course, there's a cross section of those that would be wounded and not able to, carry on like they used to, but you still that's it's a decent number. It's a large number of people with some experience. Then you got roughly 20 million other living veterans of other branches, services, just the whole gamut of different ones. But they haven't been to combat. They just had the training. They've been in different branches of service, the Army, Navy, Marines, whatever. They've had the training, but they didn't have, they don't have combat experience, but they still know how to use firearms. So there's that. Maybe some of them, there'd be some overlap between the hunters population and the military population. So, like, if you were doing, like, what do they call that? A Venn diagram, where you, like, overlay two circles and you have, like, the overlapping part is, like, the people that fit both categories would be in that situation. So you would have, like, some of the hunters would also be veterans, if you know what I'm saying, right? Okay, so you have that. So some of that would be, a crossover between hunters and veterans, but you still have millions. We're talking millions of people that know how to at least operate firearms. They might not all know basic tactics like the civilian hunting population, but they still know how to use firearms. You would have the military population of the veterans, though, who would at least have some basic tactical training. Then You throw in your different, little uh, militias and militants and whatever you have. What I mean, I don't, you could call them whatever. People give them all ascribe all kinds of different names to it, but you would have them rallying around different leaders and ideologies and so on and so forth. Then you would have like your technical experts, like you would have like computer people that would be knowledgeable with like disrupting computer type of things. I guess you could just say hacking for short. You would have those types of people. You would also have, people that know how to make things, their own homemade brews, I will just say. And you would have all kinds of kooky, crazy people. You'd have cults. You would have like everything. Just like I put in the scenario, if you would all go and watch that documentary, it shows how all of those factors sort of coalesce and how these different ideologies even clash with each other. The biggest battle, by far the biggest battle in that entire hypothetical scenario was the battle in Wyoming over the nukes at Cheyenne, over the nukes in Cheyenne, Wyoming, at the Warren Air Force Base. Because you had the fanatical, kooky, crazy, cult-like Mormon state going up against the equally crazy, fanatical, secular, humanist, ultranationalists of the NSRF, the National Salvation Revolutionary Front. And they fought each other brutally over custody of the remaining nukes, because in the storyline, the NSRF had actually evacuated some of them further east into Nebraska by train from the storage bunkers in Warren Air Force Base. But the remaining ones ended up in the Mormon state custody because the battle itself ended up as a draw, because it was like an immovable object meets an unstoppable force, like that type of situation. They couldn't really get the better of each other, but because the NSRF already got some of the nukes, they decided, let's settle this later. They came to an uneasy truce. And, they made arrangements around all that. The NSRF agreed to pull back a little bit and allow the Mormon state to get whatever they wanted for, in exchange for a truce, and the Mormon state agreed to it. In the scenario, but in that battle, you had 200,000 dying, basically, over that. That's just one example of just one of many examples I put in the scenario of not only plausible, but hyper realistic types of encounters that would occur. In a situation where your nation has collapsed and your nation has, WMDs, whether it's nukes or chemical weapons or maybe even some bioweapons, whatever it is, you're going to have crazy people trying to get their hands on those devastating weapons. Just the chemical weapons stockpiles, even if that gets into the wrong hands. There's so many 155 VX and sarin shells. They could, if they lobbed even like several hundreds of those, like they did in the Chicago battle in that hypothetical, you would have hundreds of thousands of dead people, just civilians or combatants or whatever, just like in the Chicago battle where 300,000 civilians perished in the VX shelling attack that the NSRF conducted against the regime, because the regime island of Chicago was like one of their little woke fortress cities, and the NSRF was on a mission in that hypothetical to clear the entire Midwest of regime elements. And, that's just an example, too. That's another example. So in a situation like that, that's what I'm talking about with like a paradigm shift. All of these artificial constructs, like the whole left-right paradigm, which is a false, fake, globalist paradigm to keep people trapped in the illusion, the lie that they have the ability or the power to pick who rules them. Think about how asinine that sounds. You're consenting to be ruled by somebody. Like you're asking to be ruled. When you participate in that system and you cast a vote, for one thing, the vote doesn't count because they're going to put who they want to put in anyway. But the other thing is that when you actually go and participate in that, you are giving your consent to that paradigm. You're giving your consent to be ruled by that paradigm, by that false, lying paradigm. So here's the thing with all that. When the economy tanks, the currency collapses with it, financial and economic, and you have the food and fuel collapse, which will cause all logistics to grind to a halt, as fuel will be very limited, and transportation of logistics and food and supplies will be increasingly difficult without the ample amount of fuel we had been accustomed to for so long. The nation is going to grind to a halt, and whatever limited resources remain is what will cause the new paradigm to occur, because that's when the power vacuum is going to open up, and you're going to have all these different factions scrambling for power and control, because they're going to be fighting over resources as much as they will their own ideologies, okay? When I showed you all the map that I made for that hypothetical, you had neutral areas, which neutral would be the best thing to be in a situation like that. Just defend your community, defend your immediate area, defend your neighbors, your community, protect it, don't take no sides. That's ideally, as an ideal, that is ideally the best way to ride a situation like that out as a community, if you're able to even do that. There were whole swathes of neutral territory in that map. As a matter of fact, let's give you all some visuals here. I want you all to visualize some of this with me, because, seeing what we see now, we're seeing the last gasps. I call it the last gasps of a failing system, of a failing paradigm. It's the last gasps of a failing paradigm before we end up being invaded, after we end up really hurting each other, and it's not because, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. War is a horrible thing, and I don't ever want to see that. I don't want that to come to this country, but it's like in the hypothetical, when I created all these different, the stories of each faction and how they came to be, and who led it, and what they were comprised of as far as their forces went, all of those details. I put so much detail into that hypothetical. There's so many aspects to it all, and those situations are very real. They can easily occur, just as easily as as anything else, really. We live in a time when literally anything is possible at any time, because it's literally so crazy that the psyops, they're piled on so thick anymore that they're cultivating an atmosphere of utter confusion and chaos. They're cultivating an atmosphere of utter confusion and chaos. So, let me get this out. Hold on. So, with all these layered four-dimensional psychological operations, which is truly what it is, that's all I could call it. I can't think of a better name for it than that. That also was in my documentary, basically, where it was explaining how things like that cultivated an atmosphere where people were just fed up with everything. They were just sick of everything. They were tired of the overreach. They were tired of, not being heard, their voices not being heard, and everything else, that was all in the hypothetical. I put all of that in there. Hold on, I'm laying all this out so people can even see it. It's a lot of stuff I made for that scenario. It was such a good, educational work, for people to watch. It really was. It was like a masterpiece as far as a documentary goes on something like this, because it shows exactly how and why certain things could happen and will happen. It's very easy. People just don't understand. It's quite simple for things to develop along the lines of what I had shown people. It's not that inconceivable at all whatsoever at all. Really, it's not. Hold on, y'all. Hold on. One more second. It takes a lot to lay all this out. I put so much work into all this. I had to got a lot of papers I have to lay out, and then I got to make sure the cats don't mess with it. All right. Hold on. Here we are. So here it is. Let me give you all a visual. Here is the map, and these are the different factions here. Yeah, they sent spiders into Jennifer's computer, like I said earlier, and straight up took it out. That is insane. That is lunacy. Cardinal sin to go Wikipedia now, everybody. That's a new one. That's a new one. Oh, I believe it. I totally believe it. It's crazy, though. It's crazy. That's some crazy shit right there. No joke. I have to make fun of YouTube for that, because YouTube is ridiculous. So here we go. You got all this. These are images of different things that would have been occurring. You got the HIMARS rocket system up here firing of the National Salvation Revolutionary Front. You got down here, you got the Mormon state and their one of their bishops firing off the back of an up-armored technical that they rigged up with their own homemade armor plating with a captured Chinese W-85 heavy machine gun, a 12.7 millimeter machine gun that they took from their enemies here, the narco state, who was getting Chinese and Russian weapons imported from Latin America. So things like that, you'd have captured weapons in an internal conflict. Got this guy going to, pick up mortars to run over to him, and so he can drop it in the tube and fire. These guys jumped out of the back of one of the technicals with the mortar tube and base plate. And, you got some scenes of urban conflict. So when I showed those maps of the urban battles, whether they were, whether it was like Chicago or whether it was like Macon, right there. Whether it was like Macon, whether it was just out here in Vegas. You got the Vegas like right there. Whether it was all of that or wherever, you would have had scenes like this taking place, where you would have had, tanks, because different factions, they all ended up with armor, whether they stole the armor and had people that were prior service that knew how to operate some of these things, or whether it was the units that left the actual armed forces to join the factions and brought their stuff with them. You got one knocked out here. You see the wheels all knocked off of it, and the tracks all thrown and everything. You got blasts from the tank shells, dude firing an RPG, guys in the prone position laying down fire, 2 machine gunners in the turret there, firing a 50 and a 240 Bravo, which is a 7.62 by 51 NATO. You got some more scenes of urban battle. Now, originally, I'd made this one for the invasion, And these were like partisans, American partisans fighting against the Chinese. This was like a Chinese column. But since the vehicles, these could easily be strikers too. Besides WZ551s like originally intended, because they're a little ways back. They can pass for strikers. And these guys just your regular type of militia forces that were in the scenario fighting back. You know, you'd have these guys up in the building, like in the Aleppo battle. When I showed you all that sample of what the Aleppo battle in Syria looked like, you had guys inside of taller buildings shooting across at each other. Oh, there's one. There's a guy about to fire off an AT-4. And you got a guy shooting his AK, dude shooting his M16, and down here you got the Atrocities, you got your gas can. These guys were the Jolly Roger Death Brigades. These were like the paramilitary death squads that formed into whole divisions that were like the breakthrough troops. They were like a parallel military force of the National Salvation Revolutionary Front. These are their troika leaders, their top three leaders. He was their economic and logistical and prison commandant, like the math professor in the Khmer Rouge, who was called Doik. But if you look up the Khmer Rouge and look into them, there were some pretty atrocious things that happened in their prisons they ran. So this guy was along similar lines. These could all easily be real people, you guys. Like, these could easily be real people. This guy's an ex-Green Beret colonel, Colonel McGregor. He was like their military leader, and he kind of coordinated he provided a balance for the whole troika. And then you had, Alfred Motufu, who was like their propaganda chief. He was the son of two communications and media degree, but then he flipped it all back around on the regime and created his own pirate propaganda programs and psyops to try to get people to sympathize with their cause, and they took it in a really warped, radical direction, just like the factions did in Syria. Remember, I used a lot of modern internal conflicts as the template for my work. There's nothing about this country that would make it, immune to any of these types of occurrences. These things could easily occur here. So then you got, your Mormon state, fanatics right here, and they're loading up one of their kamikaze 18-wheelers packed full of shells and C4 that they got from the Thule Army Depot, which is full of ordnance and munitions, where they test it and they either dispose of it, test it, or work on it. So that was like, they hit the jackpot when it came to that. And this was like the kooky cult-like faction, the Mormon state. They were very radical. You got another mortar team, a technical. This guy, their generals, which were their acolytes, would ride into battle with their troops. And this is an acolyte shooting his 50 cal machine gun he has off in the distance to try to hit these other technicals, which belonged to the Union of Southwestern Militias in that battle. You got an artillery piece. You got a M198 here, an M198 howitzer, and it's set up behind a big berm here, like a big berm out in the desert, firing off in the distance. You got the leaders of the equally radical Mormon state. The Mormon state matched the NSRF in terms of like sheer brutality and fanaticism and how radical and crazy they were. The NSRF and the Mormon state were probably like the two craziest factions on the entire map. But they had their very near apocalyptic showdown over the nukes at Warren Air Force Base in the beginning of the internal conflict in the scenario. That was the bloodiest battle in the entire war. So you got Acolyte Issachar, you got Grand Acolyte Mordecai, Supreme Acolyte Josiah, their supreme, cult religious leader. So, then you had the globalist regime. You got their little corporation flag with the gold fringing on it. The corporation flag. You got the shadowy Western elites here. You got them pulling the strings on their political parasite puppets, and you got the Free American Army here. You got General Mathis. He was the supreme commander of all the reserve forces, the Army Reserve Forces, and he was the one that originally in the scenario he orchestrated the coup, but the coup failed. But he ended up taking a lot of the military with him, and they also raised up constitutional militias to be like filler units. Then you had the examples of weapons of mass destruction. You got a M198 155 millimeter howitzer. You got VX nerve agent shells here. And you got one of their cannon crew members. This could be any of the three factions that had chemical weapons. So it could be VX or Sarin. And this is what I was talking about when I said they used those and annihilated a lot of the civilians in the southern when they used all those shells. And then you got the what the Mormon state did, and when they had a lot of technical experts. They had a lot of technical experts in the Thule Army Depot who worked on the EOD robotics and the they had mechanical and electrical engineers. They had all kinds of ordnance specialists, and they had basically everything under one roof. Everything was under one roof. It was all conveniently in one spot, which is why the Mormon state was able to rig up one of these warheads, and they gave it to one of their proxies, who drove it into the to the city of San Diego there. Boom. So these are examples of common things you would see in internal conflicts when there's a paradigm shift. Up here, of course, you had the different atrocities. You had examples of more atrocities. You had the religious police of the Mormon state, and they took the guillotines that the regime had purchased when they took over Utah, and they ended up using them on the regime instead. Or anybody that they deemed was unclean or unholy, they beheaded them. Then, of course, you had the NSRF and their death squads who roved the countryside in their territory looking for regime forces or officials, which they dealt with, as you see. So these types of things would be occurring in an internal conflict. This is the type of stuff that happens in modern internal conflicts. Like, they're about to chop off this dude's arm. That's commonly done in African civil wars, where they chop off the arms of their victims and they cauterize it so that they don't bleed out. And their mass grave back there, and they're about to burn this guy alive at a stake. And gas can. There's their little garden shed, a common garden shed that they used as a supply shed where they put their water, food, fuel, ammo. So, yeah. Oh yeah, Jeffrey, in my scenario, they had a battle with each other. Remember, they were Jeffrey. The speaking of that, the Mormon state and the La Raza Narco state had plenty of battles against each other, but sometimes it would spill over into Mexico because you had foreign volunteers for the Mormon state, which came from like Brazil, Philippines, Mexico, places with big Mormon populations. They got volunteers, but then you also had the, narco groups coming in too. So they would fight each other. It would spill over into Mexico. That type of thing happens in internal conflicts too, where you have spillovers into neighboring countries. It's called a spillover. Yeah. So, these are just examples of things that happen in internal conflicts and easily could happen anywhere, including here. Like I said, we ain't special. New paradigms can occur at any time, They happen so quickly that, they happen so fast that, people really, they'll be surprised, caught off guard by it, because paradigm shifts can literally happen when least expected. And all it really takes for a major paradigm shift to occur anywhere, all it takes is a collapse of your economy, your finances, your food, your fuel. When you take food and fuel out of people's mouths and people can't eat, people can't drive, people can't work, people can't, conduct day-to-day regular activities, that is going to be when even apathetic and lazy people end up losing their minds. That'll be when they end up losing their minds. So that'll be when you see a lot of craziness, a lot of madness going down. And that would be when you would see your paradigm shift occur. Like I said in my last live, which was a really good live, it really was. Even I was satisfied with it. I explained how, all of that works and why it works. It's this stuff is not, it's not a joke. It's very, very dire at this point. It's very dire. It's very serious. So, I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time. Look, I wanted to get on here originally to help Jennifer. I wasn't even going to do a live, but, I hate what happened to her. What happened to her is rotten. It's disgusting. YouTube is disgusting for what they do to people. I have a son, she has sons, we're trying to protect our youngsters, We're all trying to protect our youngsters. We don't want to see this type of garbage going down, We don't. But unfortunately, it does occur. So, I'm going to go ahead and talk to people real quick, see what everybody's talking about in here. How's everybody doing? Hey, Fear No Man, great to see you. Good to see you, Ken. Hey, Romero and Brandy and Third Temple and Jeffrey and Jennifer, my dear. Yeah, they won't give her video back. They won't give Jennifer's video back. They straight up sent spiders into her computer, the electronic kind of spiders. And they literally took it out. So again, go to the Yeshua Jesus' Truth channel. They've commented in my most recent post that I made about one of the puppets, the puppet who brags and boasts about this toxin that he wants to be considered the father of, the one that everybody can thank for what happened. The people still, some people haven't gotten the hint yet, the clue yet that, he's responsible for all that shit, he's responsible for it. At the end of the day, he is, because he's the one that sanctioned it. He sanctioned it. He had to know. He had to know. And if he didn't know, then, what kind of person is that, really? Come on now.
It's these people are demons. These people are demons, or they're demon possessed. That they go along with these agendas. That they're the ones that concoct these wicked agendas. And I'm talking about both sets of elites, the Western elites and the Eastern elites. Oh, they're just as evil, or if not more evil, Wei Fang of the CCP, the Chi-Com defense minister, he talks about committing genocide against the American people out of his own mouth, in his own speeches. So have the last two Chi-Com defense ministers before him, too. In their speeches to the Chi-Com Politburo, they're basically their regime leadership. They all get up there, give speeches, so on and so forth, but oftentimes you'll get little tidbits of their agenda and their plans for what they want to do to the West and its people, and its leaders. Like I said about Deuteronomy 28, in last night's live, the ruling class of a judged nation, they don't get spared. The Bible says that the king also goes into slavery, captivity with the people of a defeated nation. So, the best metric, like I said in my other live, by which you can judge everything that's going to happen, or that you see happening, whether it's legitimate or not. This is the metric how you can decide whether what you see is legitimate or whether it's a psyop. Because psyops are piled heavily upon one another right now. They're trying to create the confusion and pandemonium, for their agenda, but their agenda is going to backfire and fail because God laughs at them. I'm talking about these Western elites. Just like how Bashar al-Assad almost lost his regime, they're going to start losing their grip on power too. They're not, special. They're not, excluded from judgment. So we know that we're going to be stuck with China as the world superpower until the end of time, until the Battle of Armageddon. Because the kings of the East, China, they're coming to that battle, and they're bringing a ginormous army to it. So, knowing what we know, and that the psyops and the overreach and everything is piled on thick right now, the best metric by which you can judge things, again, is first collapse, then internal conflict, then foreign invasion. You're going to have other things happening too, interspersed between all that. You're going to have those other fronts opening up around the world, like other regional conflicts and theaters, like I talked about many times in the past, many months ago. I'm holding to that. It's already starting to happen. You got Serbia, Kosovo flaring up. That has the potential to become something. It does. There's Chi-Com troops that definitely has potential to become something as a flashpoint between Eastern and Western forces. And the Western KFOR, the Western forces that protect Kosovo, they will be destroyed in an instant because China will crush them. China can overrun a lot of Europe along with Russia. They'll both do it together. So they have other allies there too. It's not just them. They've got Belarus. Oh, and now there's a North Korean expeditionary force going there, It lines up prophetically, It really does, There's going to be the end of the West. And they're building their coalition to destroy the West on all fronts. In Europe, North America, Oceania, which is Australia and New Zealand, and, elsewhere, Taiwan, that could occur either before or during when we get invaded. Because literally, China has enough forces. They have enough forces with the biggest military forces on Earth, conventionally speaking. They have the ability to fight a war on multiple fronts at the same time. At the same time. They're big enough. And they have allies to boot. Russia being their strongest ally they've got, but China is obviously the senior partner. They're the strongest of all. But Russia's the second strongest. And we've sunk to that of a regional power, if that, because we have our hollowed out, woke, depleted military, which is giving away much of its ammunition, much of its missiles, much of everything it needs to be able to conduct an effective war. How are you going to fight without ammo? Huh? You're going to run out of ammo quick if you keep giving it away and you can't produce it. How are you going to fight without ammo? How are you going to fight without logistics? Logistics mean everything in war. If you don't have a way to transport your supplies, whether it's trucks, whether it's trains, whether it's planes, hell, whether it's automobiles, like in my invasion story, when people were packing down their cars with supplies from Broken Bow when they were fleeing to the mountains, right as the Chi-Coms were beginning to try to encircle their town, and they did, and they cleared it. Some people stayed and got wiped out, but the smart ones got out while they still could. They loaded down their cars with everything they could. They got out. So whether it's planes, trains, automobiles, helicopters, whatever, if you don't have a way to transport your logistics, you don't have fuel, you ain't going nowhere. And your military ain't doing nothing. Your military ain't doing nothing without fuel. Nothing. And it ain't doing nothing without spare parts, which means that, if vehicles break down and there's no spare parts, you're either going to have to be forced to cannibalize other vehicles, which will put another vehicle out of commission, or you're just going to have to abandon it if you can't do that. Just like in my internal conflict scenario. Towards the end of that scenario, I made it known that fuel and logistics were running extremely low. They couldn't mount these humongous campaigns or offensives after a while because why? Because they didn't have the fuel, because they didn't have enough food to accommodate large forces and gathering in one area to conduct an offensive. So it ended up deteriorating into what's called low-intensity warfare, which is just like small-scale ambushes or laying mines or traps or occasional trading of artillery shells, things like that. Very small scale fighting, very small unit fighting. Don't get me wrong. Low intensity warfare can still claim many lives, because if you have a lot of it going on, spaced out, you're going to start losing people, in big numbers if you just have constant, steady, low-intensity warfare. It's gonna, and you have it going on in different places. It's going to add up. It's all going to add up. It's going to add up. But toward the end of that internal conflict scenario, they were running out of logistics. They were running out of food, fuel, water, everything they needed to mount big offensives, transportation. They even had to get to where they had to use animal transport a lot of times because of their fuel situation being so horrendous. But that's exactly what happens. That's exactly the type of things that happen when your logistics break down, when you don't have fuel, when you don't have parts, when you don't have things. You got to cannibalize other things. The Air Force uses more fuel than any other branch of our military. In my internal conflict scenario I made, the Air Force was largely a small participant throughout that entire thing. Very seldom were they doing air operations, at least a few months in. That all really slowed down to almost nothing. To where at the very end, they couldn't do it at all because they just didn't have the fuel. Or they didn't have the ground crew. Or they didn't have the spare parts to fix their planes that broke down. Or the runways were ruined, or whatever. It's all kinds of different things. The stars have to align when you have a military force. The stars have to align for everything to work out. It's not a willy-nilly, you can just get up and do things. No, there's a lot of dynamics involved. There's a lot of things involved in the running of a fighting force. You can't just willy-nilly do things. You have to have the logistics, the transportation. You got to have it all. You got to have it all. Otherwise, it will never work. Or it won't work effectively, I should say. It wouldn't work effectively. You won't be able to project your power very far without methods of transport and methods of logistical transport. So, I'm not going to bore you all to death with all this. So I'm going to talk to people real quick before I get off of here. I'm going to be doing my live tomorrow, my usual Tuesday, so... See here. Yeah, Shadow Mask, nobody's going to be able to do that. There's nobody that can do that. That's for sure. That's for damn sure. It's too late. It's too late. Only Yeshua Messiah could single-handedly save this land. But you know what? This land turned from him. It turned from him. You're not going to have a Nineveh moment here because you're not going to have everybody in this country repenting. That's just never going to happen. Look at the people that live here. Look at the way they are. Think they're all going to just drop their evil deeds one day and just repent? No. But if they did, you could have a Nineveh moment and Yeshua Messiah could turn it all around. But because this nation rejected him, that's never going to happen. It's too late. We're on borrowed time. We are on borrowed time, everybody. China's the world superpower. God raised them up, even though they're a heathen nation, just like he did with Babylon to punish Israel for being disobedient, just like he did with Assyria. God has raised up China to be the new world superpower. You know why? Because we had the light of Yeshua, but we turned our back as a nation on him. We in the chat didn't do that. All of us in this chat didn't do that. But the nation as a whole did that. The leaders, a large portion of the population. That is why China's the world superpower in real terms, and Russia's the second. And God's going to use them to punish this disobedient nation through invasion, through slavery, through fighting along, counterinsurgency, trying to, wipe people out that are nomadic and trying to survive. That's how the reality is going to be. So, that's I'm telling you all things before they even end up as current events or news or whatever. I'm telling you all how it's going to be before. Like I said in my last live, I've done that many times, but it often gets overlooked. But I don't care, I don't care. It is what it is. I'm not this big channel like, these pogo channels like Barf, over there. Barf, the vomit broker, who reads like old stories and tries to twist it and pass it off as new. I'm really disgusted after watching that marathon and seeing all the itemized evidence of all the different things that were done by that dude over there. I'm very disgusted at all that because that dude has done some really dirty shit to people, and it really angered me. Itemized evidence. Itemized. So you got to be careful who you listen to. If somebody just mushrooms overnight into some kind of huge, YouTube sensation, there's something up with that, folks. Something seriously going on with that. You got to be careful. Be cautious. Let's see here. Well, I love all y'all. Yeah, you're right. New world media. You're right. They are. Yeah, the Western satanic elites and the puppets they control are all devil worshippers. Then the Eastern elites, they're evil too, but they're like secular humanist type of evil. They're both extremely evil, but in different ways. But one's more arrogant and more haphazard than the other. The Eastern elites, like the CCP, the Russian political oligarchy, they're chess players, man. They're strategic thinkers. They're smart people. In fact, Russia is one of the most fiscally responsible nations on the earth right now. Look at their debt. Look how small their debt is. They have budget surpluses. They're good with money, man. Russia's good with money. China, you know, they have the biggest gold stockpile on the earth. They're about the furthest thing from broke. At a moment's notice, all they have to do is back their yuan with gold, or they can, or they're doing their petro yuan anyway. Like I've told everybody, they're even going to go to a digital yuan. They're getting off of SWIFT and onto SIPs. So China's very, very, very wise in the financial and economic arena too. They've set themselves up for success while we have been tearing ourselves down. So these Western elites cannot seriously tear down their own power base and expect to be viable and expect to make it. You can't tear down your own power base and be able to do much of anything. So, but it's part of their judgment. They're going to be caught up in their own devices. The Bible talks about that exact type of thing happening to wicked people a lot. The wicked get caught in their own devices. Yeah, New World Media. I'm not disputing it. They're all run by principalities. They're all run by principalities. These elites of the East and West. But Satan can't help himself, and Satan eats his own. It never fails. All right, well, you all be blessed. Hey, Y-Fam. It was great talking to everybody. I love each and every one of you. I love you, Jennifer. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, I don't want to seem boring to people, but I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea. So, I know people don't like to sit through the details that I like to go over and everything. Into stuff and economics, financials. People don't find that interesting when they really should, because it can benefit them to know these things. I love everybody. Y'all be blessed. Thank you for coming. Hey, Gio, good to see you. Brandy and Jennifer, my love, and Shadow Mask, everybody. Y'all be great.